So if you'll recall, last week, Jesus was telling us there are no boundaries between people, that the clean and the unclean are all clean in God's eyes. And apparently, he was just worn out. So he decided that he would go to Tyre. Now, that's not across town. You can't take a bus to get there. You might be able to take a long-term bus, but long transit bus, but it's not exactly next door. As a matter of fact, it was 20 miles away. And in those days, 20 miles is more than a day's walk. So he went way out. He didn't just go to the nearest monastery and have a little retreat. He went way out to the Mediterranean. And it appears, strangely enough, that he went by himself. We never hear a word about the disciples in these readings. Nothing is said about them at all, which is a little strange. He goes into this house. He really doesn't want anybody to know he's there, who he is, what he's about, because he's in Gentile territory. And we know, because Jesus has made it clear, that he is a Jew and that he came to bring the Jewish nation back to God. But this woman finds out about him. Now this woman is everything that those good Pharisees that he was speaking to just last Sunday and last Sunday's lesson would have been horrified to have him anywhere near. She's Greek. She has an unclean daughter. She's got a lot of nerve. She comes to this strange man. Again, that's a bad thing to do for a woman. And she comes without her husband and without a male relative to speak for her, because she's a woman, and we all know that at least in those days, women didn't speak up much. We've gotten over that. She is one of the people who taught us how to get over that. She comes to him and begs him to heal her daughter. And Jesus says it just doesn't really matter what his tone of voice is. His words are rude. He says, let the children eat first. Let the nation of Israel, he's saying, be saved first. And then the dogs may eat. My friends, nobody had a puppy dog in that time. Nobody had a lap dog that they lavished with all sorts of things, unless, of course, they were Roman and wealthy. Jews did not keep dogs for pets. Dogs were just dogs. They roamed the village. They ate, scraps of food. They did what they could. Most of them were probably feral. But your children did not have one that they played with. Nobody was tossing a ball for the dog. A dog is not a nice thing to call somebody. Actually, it still isn't a nice thing to call somebody. If somebody says you dog, you're not going to say, oh, I have one too. He's so cute. You should see what he does. It's not the way we're going to react. And that's in the end of it. But like I said, this woman has nerve. And she comes back at him and she says, sir, even the dogs get to eat the crumbs under the table. And Jesus has an oh moment. It's not the first time in Scripture that the Lord, for we do understand Jesus as the Lord, has an oh moment. If you'll recall, long time ago, back in the Exodus, a long, long time ago, Moses went up on the mountain to talk to God, and God said, I've had it with these people. I'm wiping them out. That's it. They're done. We're finished. And Moses talks him out of it. And it actually says in Exodus, and God changed God's mind. This more than once. I won't regale you with all of them because I'll forget 2 or 3. This is not new for the Lord, but it's new for the man Jesus. Somebody has challenged what he's teaching. That's never happened before. The Pharisees, when they challenge him, back off fast. They go away and say, we got to get rid of that boy. He's trouble. But they don't challenge him much in person. And this woman does. He says, for your word, for your faith, you have what you want. Go home, your daughter's been healed. It's the first time in the Gospel of Mark that Jesus heals somebody from a distance. He never touches her. He doesn't even look at her. He just says, go home, she's fine. And she is. One of the commentaries I read this week is by a woman named Elizabeth Johnson. She teaches at a Lutheran seminary in the Cameroon. She says this: I've had some interesting discussions about the story of the Syrophoenician woman with my students in Cameroon. They are troubled by this story because they have heard Muslims use this story, and particularly Jesus' words in Matthew, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, to tell people that the Christian faith is not really for Africans. My response is that it is easy to take one verse out of context, but one has to read to the end of the story. At the end of the story, Jesus praises the woman's faith and her daughter is healed. She does receive the gift of salvation, and we are all included in this gift, no matter what our nationality, ethnicity, or social status. But then I realized that it is easy for me to say that, coming from a place of privilege as an American. I sense that my students are not convinced that it is enough to have crumbs from the table. Materially speaking, that is pretty much all that they have ever had. They don't want to be told that they should be satisfied with spiritual crumbs as well. We're not meant to read this story literally. Excuse me. We're not meant to believe that we only get a little bit of spiritual life from Jesus, for we also have read to the end of the story, to the very end of the story, to the crucifixion and the resurrection, and we know there's more than that. But brothers and sisters, what's wrong with the crumbs from God? Even God's crumbs are plentiful. They are huge and abundant, and they fill us up. If you don't remember the story of the feeding of the 5,000, go back and look at it again. 12 baskets of crumbs were gathered up and fed people for a long time. We think we need more. We think we need something really big. We think that we are due something really big, that it is our right because we are sitting here in this place worshiping together as Christians, faithful to not only God, but to our church and our community. We do good works, we feed the poor, we take care of others, and yet we don't get any more than anybody else. And that's good news, because it means there really is no difference between us. As far as God is concerned, we are exactly the same. Every single one of us. We get the same. No matter that some days we feel like we should get a lot and other days we feel like we're not worthy even to gather up the crumbs under your table, as we used to say in Rite One, or still do sometimes. We worry about quantity. And Jesus just doesn't care about quantity. Jesus cares about what's good, what's quality in our lives. And all of the quality in our life begins and ends with the Lord. Begins and ends with the Christ who taught us how to do what it is we do, who showed us the way, who gave us the words, who drenched us in love, and still does, if we will but open our own ears and our own tongues to speak the word and to hear. Which brings us to the second story. Jesus is still in Gentile territory. He's gone from up here on the Mediterranean around this way to Galilee, and he's down here in the Decapolis. It's a long way. And it's quite likely that he stays in Gentile territory, not so he will not be known, but because the Syrophoenician woman has said to him, your ministry is not just to Israel. Your ministry belongs to all of us, even those of us who gather up the crumbs under the table. So he goes to the Decapolis, and they don't have to ask him twice to heal this man who is unclean because he can't hear and he can't see, who is not a Jew, who probably lives a very destitute life, so he's probably not literally not clean. They bring this man to Jesus and beg Jesus to heal him, and Jesus does exactly that. He has heard with his own ears, which are now unstopped thanks to the Syrophoenician woman, that his ministry is far greater than he thought it was. That he is to go to all peoples, not just Jews, but all people. And yet we still worry about whether we have enough. We have enough. If you don't know that, Think about the people in your life who have demonstrated that for you. The people who might not have had anything material at all, but have a lot spiritually. And we say, oh, I could never be as spiritual as that person. Or we say, have somebody say to us, I wish I was spiritual like you. And the answer is you are. You are. We are all equally spiritual in the eyes of God because we believe, because we do, we act on our belief. We not only have faith, we have works. We love the Lord and we love our neighbors as ourselves, not just because Jesus told us to, but because it feels like the right thing to do. Even the Syrophoenician woman knew that. Even the friends of the deaf and mute man knew that in the Decapolis. It is not something just Jewish people knew or know. It belongs to all of us. We do not cast people out. We do not draw lines. It is so hard for us to remember that because every single time I read something in a newspaper, I want to draw a line. I want to go, yeah, up, I'm on this side, they're over there. And Jesus says, what's that line for? Just like last week's lesson, Jesus says, that's not necessary. Cut that out. Because I came to all of you, and all of you feast on the table, and you are welcome to gather the crumbs underneath as well. Whatever you need, it will be provided for you in the kingdom. Homer Williams' funeral was on Friday. He was a tremendous part of this congregation, gave of himself selflessly, quietly, lovingly. He understood this. Homer and his wife are feasting at that banquet right now, having been here gathering crumbs all of their lives, knowing that those crumbs are sufficient, because the feast is still to come. We may be gathering crumbs, my brothers and sisters, but the table is set.